Jacinta Okafor, a 26-year-old beautiful billionaire heiress, stood quietly on the balcony of her family's penthouse, overlooking the heart of Lagos. She wore soft silk pajamas, her hair tied up in a loose bun. In her hands was a warm cup of tea, but it didn't bring her any comfort. Below her, the view was perfect. Shiny cars pulling up to Palace Suites, her father's flagship hotel. Guests laughed by the pool, uniformed staff moved swiftly through the lobby, and cameras clicked as another celebrity stepped into the hotel. Jacinta had grown up in all this luxury, attention, and endless comfort. She had studied in London, graduated top of her class in hospitality management, and returned home just a year ago. Everyone called her lucky. Some even said she had the perfect life. But in her heart, she felt alone. She took a sip of her tea and let out a quiet sigh. People think I have it all, she thought. But what's the use of all this if no one truly sees me? Her phone buzzed beside her. Another message from Femi, the son of a state governor. They'd been set up on a dinner date last week by her father. Femi: "Hey babe, thinking about that yacht party? I'll send a car. Just bring your fine self." Jacinta shook her head and turned the phone face down. It was always the same. Every man she met seemed more interested in her father's name than her dreams, her laugh, or even her story. She stared out at the city again, the busy roads below and the rising sun above. It all looked bright, but inside, she felt dull. The glass door behind her slid open. Her mother, Mrs. Okafor, stepped onto the balcony. She looked elegant, as always, but her eyes softened when she saw her daughter. "You're up early again," she said gently. Jacinta nodded. "Couldn't sleep?" Her mother joined her at the railing. "Your father's planning another introduction lunch. He says this one's different. Just finished law school in Canada." Jacinta gave a tired smile. "Mum, they're never different. They all talk about themselves, about deals, cars, and travel. Never about what I love. Never about who I am." There was a quiet pause between them. "I want something real, Mum," Jacinta added, her voice low. "I want someone who doesn't care that I'm a billionaire's daughter. Someone who likes me, not my last name." Her mother looked at her for a long moment, then wrapped her arm around Jacinta's shoulders. "You deserve that, Jacinta. You really do." She knew something had to change. She was tired of being seen as a symbol of wealth. She wanted to be truly seen. As the morning light warmed the city, Jacinta Okafor, the billionaire heiress who had everything, stood quietly, already thinking of a way to escape the life everyone else thought was perfect. She sat at the long dining table in the Okafor's private dining room, stirring her fruit juice without drinking it. Across from her sat yet another potential husband, a clean-cut, smooth-talking man named Tochukwu, the son of an oil tycoon. He had spent the last 20 minutes talking about his father's offshore rigs, the cars he owned, and how difficult it was to fly private during rainy season. Jacinta nodded politely, but her mind was far away. Then he leaned in, flashing a perfect smile. "You know, Jacinta, with the kind of life we'll have together, you won't need to lift a finger. My family's connections are strong. We'll be at every red carpet event in Lagos, Abuja, even Dubai. I already told my mum you'll stop working after the wedding." Jacinta blinked, forcing a smile. "I actually love my work." He chuckled like she had made a joke. "Come on, work? You're too beautiful for stress." She looked down at her untouched meal. The same conversation, different suit. That night, she sat in her room, barefoot, with her earrings still in her hand. She stared at herself in the mirror. Her reflection looked flawless. Perfect makeup, perfect hair, perfect everything. But she felt like a stranger inside her own body. She heard a knock on her door. "Come in," she said softly. Her father walked in. Chief Okafor was always confident, his presence filling any room he entered. He didn't smile. "So, what did you think of Tochukwu?" Jacinta took a deep breath. "Daddy, he didn't ask me one personal question. He doesn't know what I like and what I don't like, and he didn't seem interested. He told me I should quit my career before we even got to dessert." Chief Okafor frowned. "Jacinta, men like Tochukwu are rare. Strong family, clean background, good money. What more do you want?" "I want to be known," she said quietly. not just married off like a business deal. Enough of that talk, her father snapped. You are not a child. You're 26. People are beginning to talk. Your name carries weight, and it must be paired with the right name. She stood up from her chair, her voice cracking now. Daddy, please. Let me choose my own love. Someone who sees me, not my last name. I want to marry someone who actually knows me, not the version of me they read about in magazines. Chief Okafor looked at her like she had just said something ridiculous. Love, he scoffed. This is real life, Jacinta. Not a romance novel, and definitely not those Korean soap operas you love to watch. I'm not asking for a fairy tale. I'm asking for something real, she said, her eyes filled with tears. I'm tired of being surrounded by people who only see my father's hotels and bank accounts. Her father's expression hardened. No man wants a woman who's too independent. Sooner or later you'll see I was right. And just like that he walked out, leaving Jacinta standing in the middle of her room, her heart heavy, her hands trembling. Later that night, Jacinta sat on the edge of her bed, eyes red from crying. Her mother came in quietly, holding a small tray with tea. Without a word, she sat beside her daughter and placed the tray on the nightstand. I heard your voice from the hallway, she said gently. Jacinta leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. Mum, why does it feel like I'm the only one who wants something deeper? Mrs. Okafor stroked her hair. Because not everyone understands what it means to be seen and loved for who they are. I know that's what you want, and I think you deserve a chance to find it. But Daddy, he'll never let me. Her mother paused, then said softly, Let me talk to him. Jacinta looked up. Really? If this is something your heart needs, her mother whispered, then I'll help you fight for it. But promise me something. What? If you don't find it, if this journey doesn't work out, you'll come back and let us help again. No more hiding. Jacinta nodded, fresh tears falling. I promise. In that moment, something shifted inside her. For the first time, someone was truly on her side. After leaving her daughter's room, Mrs. Okafor sat across from her husband in their private study, watching him pour himself a glass of water. His face was calm, but she could tell he was still upset from his earlier conversation with Jacinta. She's not a child anymore, she said gently, breaking the silence. Chief Okafor sighed and sat down slowly. And that's the problem. She thinks she knows better than everyone else. She doesn't think she knows better. She just wants something real. Chief Okafor shook his head. We didn't build all of this for her to marry a nobody. She needs someone who understands our level. Someone who fits. But what if all those men fit your status but don't fit her soul? He looked at his wife, surprised at her words. She's hurting, darling. She's never been one to ask for much. If this is the only thing she's ever really asked us for, can't we at least let her try? There was a long pause. Then he put down his glass. What happens when this fantasy of hers crashes? When someone uses her, hurts her? Mrs. Okafor smiled softly. Then she'll come back to us, stronger. But if we don't let her go, she'll always wonder what could have happened. Finally, after a moment of silence, Chief Okafor spoke. Fine, let her try. But no, I don't want her to go far away from us. She can start as a low-level staff member at one of our hotels, a branch she isn't familiar with. If she wants to live like an ordinary girl, then she'll have to start at the very bottom. Mrs. Okafor nodded. I believe that is also her plan. She's ready. He scoffed. We'll see. A few days later, Jacinta Okafor stood in front of the mirror in her room. Not as Jacinta, the billionaire's daughter, but as Anna, the hotel's newest waitress. She had long decided to go in as a waitress, as this would enable her to live as she wanted without the attention that came with being a billionaire's daughter. She had tied her hair into a low bun, pressed down flat under a hairnet. She wore a plain uniform, her usual jewelry tucked away in a drawer. Her makeup was light and natural, and to complete the look, she'd even added a small fake mole just below her right eye. She stared at herself for a long time. No lashes, no gloss, no designer bag. Just her. It felt strange, but somehow freeing. The next morning, she arrived at the hotel branch where no one knew her, Palace Suites Mainland, a smaller but busy and luxurious location known for its steady traffic and strict supervisors. She stepped into the staff locker room, carrying a second-hand handbag, her new ID card clipped to her shirt. The name read, Anna Johnson, Waitress. One of the other girls glanced at her, whispered something to a friend, and giggled. Jacinta, or Anna, now pretended not to notice. Her first shift began in the hotel's main restaurant. The man in charge of the floor was Mr. Jude, a tall, middle-aged supervisor with a sharp tongue and a permanent frown. He barely looked at her when she introduced herself. "New girl?" he asked without emotion. "Yes, sir. I'm Anna," she replied quietly. He eyed her up and down. "Young girls like you come here all the time thinking they'll meet some rich man to change their lives. This is a hotel, not a dating site. Just do your job and don't cause drama." Jacinta blinked, taken aback. I didn't come here for that." He scoffed. "They all say that." He handed her a small notebook and pointed at table 4. "Start with that one. And please don't spill anything. I've had enough of that this week." By the end of the day, her feet ached. Her back was sore from carrying trays. Her ears rang from all the shouting in the kitchen. No one offered to help. No one smiled at her. To them, she was just another broke girl looking for tips and attention. And oddly enough, that was exactly what she needed them to believe. As she sat in the staff break room that night, sipping cold water and wiping sweat from her forehead, she felt exhausted, but strangely alive. For the first time in a long time, no one called her princess, or madam, or Okafor's daughter. They just saw her as Anna, and that's exactly how she wanted it. The first week was rough. Every shift at the restaurant felt like a test Jacinta hadn't prepared for. Plates slipped from her hands. She mixed up orders, and one time she accidentally poured orange juice into a glass meant for water, right in front of the guest. The laughter from the other waitresses was loud and mean. "Who trained this one? She wants to be a big madam by smiling at everyone, but she doesn't even know table numbers. This one thinks eye service will give her a miracle." Jacinta smiled through it all, even when it stung. She reminded herself why she was here. These people didn't know her, and for once, that was exactly what she needed. So she stayed back after each shift to watch how the experienced waitresses handled their trays. She practiced walking with plates in front of the kitchen mirror. She wrote down the menu over and over in a small notebook she kept hidden in her pocket. Slowly, she got better. She learned how to balance 3 plates without shaking, how to read a customer's mood from just one glance, how to move fast but still smile. By the second week, Mr. Jude nodded at her performance, his version of high praise. "You're not as useless as I thought," he grunted one morning. It almost felt like a compliment. One day after her shift, while she was wiping down a table, a soft voice spoke behind her. "Don't mind them, you know. All those girls talking." Jacinta turned and saw a waitress she had noticed a few times. Slim, short braids, kind eyes. Her name tag read Sandra. "They talk about everyone who works hard," Sandra added, "especially when they're jealous." Jacinta smiled, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Thanks. I'm just trying not to mess anything up." "You're doing fine," Sandra said. "Better than I did when I started. First day I dropped 3 full trays. Thought they'd fire me immediately." They both laughed. From that moment, a quiet friendship began. One evening, after a long shift, Jacinta was walking toward the back gate of the hotel to meet her driver as usual. She always waited until it was dark, so fewer people would see her enter the tinted black SUV parked outside. But that night, she hesitated. She was tired of hiding in the shadows. One mistake, and everything would be exposed. "Anna," Sandra called behind her, "you heading out?" Jacinta turned quickly. "Yeah, just taking a walk." She gave a small nod, then looked around to make sure no one was watching, and as if to make sure Sandra had not spotted her driver. "You know, if you need a place to stay closer to work, you can stay with me. I noticed you always rush and try to leave early," Sandra said. Jacinta blinked. "Really?" Sandra nodded. "I sleep in the hotel's cleaning room sometimes. They don't know. It's small, but it's better than nothing." Jacinta added. "No wonder you look tired all the time. You don't need to sleep there anymore. Just come stay with me. I mean, what are friends for?" Jacinta was stunned. She barely knew Sandra, yet here she was, offering her the little she had. Her eyes watered a little.
You'd let me stay, even though you barely know me? Sandra smiled. You're my friend. You work hard, that's enough. Jacinta paused, then said quietly, Thank you. Really, this will help me a lot. What she didn't say was that it would help her stay hidden. She knew it was only a matter of time before someone saw her slipping into a luxury car in a waitress uniform. Her disguise would crumble. Living closer, living simply, would protect the lie. Now she just had to convince her parents to let her leave the house. That night, Jacinta sat in the back of the car, her driver heading toward the estate. She looked out the window quietly. Miss Jacinta, the driver said, glancing through the mirror. You mentioned earlier that I shouldn't come tomorrow? She hesitated.
No, she said softly. Not for a while. He didn't ask questions. He nodded and drove on. Jacinta leaned back in her seat, her thoughts spinning. Now she had to tell her parents she needed to move closer to work without raising suspicion. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing about this journey was meant to be. She looked out at the stars above Lagos and whispered to herself, I just want to be real, even if no one sees me. She walked into the mansion quietly that night, her shoes in hand, her bag hanging low on her shoulder. The house was calm, its silence broken only by the faint sound of the TV playing in the living room. Her parents were there, seated side by side. Her mother looked up first. You're home late, she said, concerned. How was work? Jacinta hesitated, then sat down across from them. Good evening, Mom and Dad. I need to talk to both of you. Chief Okafor lowered the volume of the TV and turned to face her. What is it? She looked at her mother first, then her father. I want to move out just for a while. I found a small place near the hotel. I'd like to stay there. There was a beat of silence. Her mother's brows drew together immediately. Move out? To where? You're already going undercover as a poor girl, and now you want us to allow you to leave this house? Jacinta, that's something else entirely. Her father hadn't spoken yet. He was watching her closely. Mum, Jacinta said softly, please understand. It's hard to keep the story going when I'm sneaking into a mansion every night. Someone might see the driver, or the car, or even me changing clothes. I need to live the life fully if I'm going to make this work. Mrs. Okafor sat up straighter. And what if someone follows you? What if something happens? You're not just anyone. This country isn't safe. Kidnappings, break-ins, do you know how dangerous this is? Jacinta nodded. I do, but I won't draw attention to myself. I've been careful. No one knows who I am. I dress simply. I use a different name. And the place isn't far from work. It's just a small room. Her mother shook her head. It's still a huge risk. Jacinta's voice broke a little as she said, Mom, I've never asked for much. But this is the first thing I've truly wanted for myself. I know it sounds strange, but what I'm doing, it matters. If I'm going to do this, I need to do it properly. Please. She looked at her father. Daddy, you said you wanted to see if I could handle the real world. Let me prove I can. Please. The room was quiet again. Chief Okafor leaned back in his chair and finally spoke. How long? I don't know yet, Jacinta replied honestly. A few months, maybe. I'll still check in. I won't disappear. He nodded slowly. You'll keep your phone on. Always. You'll let your mother check in with you daily. Yes. He exchanged a look with his wife, who still looked uneasy, but slowly she gave a quiet nod. Jacinta's eyes lit up. So, I can go? Her mother sighed deeply. I don't like it. But if this is what it takes to help you find peace, then go. Jacinta jumped from her seat and hugged her mother tightly. Thank you. I promise I'll be careful. I'll be fine. 2 days later, Jacinta arrived at Sandra's tiny flat wearing a simple dress and holding a modest duffel bag. The apartment was small, with only 2 rooms and a single bathroom. But it was clean, warm, and honest. Sandra opened the door with a wide smile. You really came? Jacinta nodded. Told you I would. Sandra stepped aside and welcomed her in. It's not much, but it's ours. Jacinta looked around, already feeling lighter. I'll pay part of the rent once I get my salary, she said. Sandra waved it off. Let's get through the first week first.
We'll figure it out. Jacinta dropped her bag on the floor and took a deep breath. No chandeliers, no air conditioning, no housekeeper waiting to bring her tea. But for the first time in her life, she felt free. This was her choice, and she was finally living it. The next morning, Jacinta stood by the drink station, wiping glasses with focus, but her heart wasn't at peace. Lately, the stares had become more frequent, the whispers louder, and the comments from some guests and even staff had started to shift from annoying to disturbing. One of the older waitresses had warned her days ago. Keep to yourself and don't smile too much. Some men think that's an invitation. She'd nodded then, but now the warning felt very real. That evening, during a busy dinner rush, a man in his late 40s sat at table 8, dressed in a fine suit and gold watch. From the moment Jacinta walked over with the menu, his eyes had barely left her face. "Pretty girl like you shouldn't be carrying plates," he said, his voice low. Jacinta kept her smile polite but distant. "Would you like to start with something to drink, sir?" He leaned back, smirking. "I'd like to start with you." She didn't respond. As she turned to walk away, he reached out and touched her lower back lightly. Jacinta froze, shocked. "Sir, please don't touch me," she said, her voice calm, firm. He raised an eyebrow. "Relax. I know girls like you, just say your price." She stepped back quickly and left. Minutes later, she returned with his drink, carefully placing it on the table. But the man wasn't done. When she tried to walk away again, he stood and bumped the table, making the glass of water spill over his own suit. He gasped dramatically. "What is wrong with you?" he shouted. Jacinta's heart jumped. "I didn't touch anything, sir. You poured water on me. Look at my jacket." The restaurant fell silent. Everyone turned. Before Jacinta could say another word, Mr. Jude stormed over. "What happened here?" "This foolish girl poured water on me," the guest barked. "And with this level of service, you expect people like me to come back?" Jacinta's voice trembled. "Sir, I didn't—" Mr. Jude raised his hand, silencing her. "Is this how you treat guests? Apologize now." "I didn't—" "Now," Mr. Jude snapped. Jacinta stood there, embarrassed, her hands shaking. The entire restaurant was watching. "This is unbelievable," she whispered under her breath. Then a calm voice spoke behind them. "I don't think she did anything wrong." Everyone turned. A young man stood nearby, dressed in a crisp, button-down shirt tucked into grey slacks. He looked composed but firm, his eyes focused on the guest. "I was watching from my table. She didn't spill anything. You bumped the table yourself." The guest scoffed. "Who are you to speak? Customers are always right." The young man's voice stayed calm. Not when they lie, and not when they harass someone just doing their job. Jacinta stared at him, completely still. Who was this man? The guest grabbed his jacket and huffed. "I'll be reporting this. This hotel has forgotten who pays the bills." He stormed off. Silence followed. Mr. Jude looked confused. "Sir, sorry, may I ask?" The young man turned to him and said politely, "I'm Daniel Ume, senior accountant from headquarters. I'm here to audit this branch for the week." Mr. Jude blinked. "Oh yes, of course. Welcome, sir." Daniel turned to Jacinta, offering the smallest smile. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, thank you." "I'll see you around," he said. And with that, he walked away, just like that, calm, confident, and gone. Jacinta remained standing. She had never met anyone who stood up for her like that. And she definitely hadn't expected the first person to do so to be so kind and striking. She turned to head back to the kitchen, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. For the first time since she'd started this journey, someone had seen her without asking for anything back. And she would not forget that face anytime soon. That night, she lay on the edge of the thin mattress in Sandra's small apartment, staring at the ceiling. The soft hum of a fan in the corner was the only sound in the room, but her thoughts were anything but quiet. She couldn't stop thinking about Daniel, his calm voice, the way he stood up for her, how he didn't hesitate for even a second. He didn't look at me like a problem to solve, she thought. He looked at me like I mattered. She smiled to herself in the dark. It had only been a few seconds, a few words, but something had shifted inside her. Not love, not yet, but something close, something hopeful. The days that followed passed quickly. Jacinta continued her shifts, working harder than ever. She stayed polite, focused, and kind. Even Mr. Jude had stopped barking at her every chance he got. But at home, things began to change. Sandra, who had once been warm and kind, now carried a different tone in her voice, sharp, impatient, annoyed. One night, as they folded laundry in silence, Sandra finally spoke up. "I've been hearing things." Jacinta looked up. "What kind of things?" Sandra crossed her arms. "That you've been rejecting men, rich men, men who could change your life." Jacinta blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "There was that man in the black Mercedes last week. He asked about you. You didn't even say good evening." Jacinta frowned. "He made me uncomfortable." Sandra scoffed. "Sometimes you have to act like you're interested, even if you're not. That's how you move up. That's how you get seen." Jacinta was quiet. Sandra continued. "You can't just keep pretending you're above it all. It's either you play the game or stay broke." "I'm not pretending," Jacinta said softly. "I just don't want to do things I'll regret later. That's all. I don't want to go about sleeping with men because I want to get rich quick." Sandra shook her head. "You're too naive. This world isn't about dignity. It's about opportunity." The tension between them grew over the week. Then came the breaking point. Jacinta returned home from a late shift, only to find Sandra pacing the room, clearly upset. "What's wrong?" Jacinta asked. Sandra turned on her. "You embarrassed me." "What?" "That man from last night, the one sitting at table 5. He asked me to talk to you. Said he wanted to take you out. He even gave me something for your hair and your transport." Jacinta's heart dropped. "You collected money? For me?" Sandra threw a folded envelope on the bed. "I thought I was helping." Jacinta stood there, stunned. "Sandra, I never asked for this. I never said yes." "And you never will," Sandra snapped. "You think you're better than the rest of us, always acting holy, always working like you're building a palace. But you're just like everyone else here, broke and stuck. Only difference is you don't even know how to survive." Jacinta's voice shook. "I'm not judging anyone. I'm just trying to live right." Sandra's voice went cold. "Then go live your righteous life somewhere else." Jacinta stared at her in disbelief. "You're kicking me out." Sandra crossed her arms. "Yes. I can't keep living with someone who thinks she's too holy to exist." That night, with nowhere to go, Jacinta returned to the hotel after midnight, carrying her small bag. She quietly slipped into the staff locker room and sat on the floor behind a stack of laundry carts. She didn't cry at first. She just sat there, still, stunned, silent. The pain of it all sat heavy in her chest. Not just because she'd lost a place to stay, but because she had lost her only friend. She had truly believed Sandra cared, that she had found someone genuine in the chaos. But now, even that was gone. Eventually the tears came. She buried her face in her knees, muffling her sobs in the silence of the dark room. "Why is it so hard to just be myself?" she whispered. Alone, with nothing but her honesty and her heartbreak, Jacinta closed her eyes and held on to the only thing she had left, her belief that staying true to herself was still worth it, even if it hurt. The next evening, Jacinta sat quietly on the lower bunk of the staff hostel, surrounded by the low murmur of fan noise, quiet snoring, and the occasional cough. The room was cramped, the mattress thin, the air warm and still. She hugged her knees to her chest. Everything she had left was packed inside a small bag at her feet. She had never felt this far from home. The loneliness wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she stared at the wall in the dark. "God," she whispered, "is this really worth it? Maybe I should have just stayed at home, married anyone my parents chose." But even as the words left her mouth, her heart didn't believe them. She wiped her eyes. She still wanted to find something real, something true, even if it meant breaking in the process. The next morning, Jacinta dragged herself into the hotel early. Her uniform was freshly ironed and her hair tied neatly into a bun. She moved slowly, tired but determined.
In the hallway, while mopping near the staff entrance, an older woman approached her. She wore a worn cleaning apron and smiled with soft, kind eyes. Mama Peace, the hotel's longest-serving cleaner. I heard you're sleeping in the quarters now, she said quietly. Jacinta looked down, embarrassed. Just for a while. Mama Peace nodded, her voice gentle. Life gets heavy sometimes, but don't let it press you down. Jacinta didn't speak, but Mama Peace placed a hand on her shoulder. It is character that takes a person far, not shortcuts. Don't let the world change your heart. That evening, as she carried a tray of food into the restaurant, another familiar figure approached her from the kitchen. Mrs. Ajayi, the head cook. You again, she teased, wiping her hands on her apron. Still working overtime? Jacinta smiled faintly. Just helping with the rush. Mrs. Ajayi gave her a proud look. You keep doing good. The right people will notice eventually. Jacinta's chest warmed at those words. Maybe she was doing something right after all. Over the next week, Jacinta poured her focus into her work. She learned how to handle impatient guests without losing her calm. She began offering to cover shifts, stayed late when the kitchen needed help, and never once raised her voice. Soon, people noticed. Staff began calling her the one with quick feet. Even Mr. Jude had less to complain about. One quiet afternoon during her break, Jacinta sat in the small staff canteen, eating plain rice from a plastic container. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Is that jollof I'm smelling? She looked up to see Daniel, the same man who had spoken up for her that day in the restaurant. He had a plate of rice in one hand and a bottle of water in the other. Jacinta's heart skipped a beat. Oh, hi, she said, smiling shyly. Mind if I sit? She nodded quickly. Sure. He sat down beside her, pulling out a chair like they'd done this 100 times. You always this quiet when you eat? He teased. Jacinta laughed softly. Only when I'm tired. He grinned. Good. Means I'm not the only one struggling through these long days. They began talking, softly, slowly. Nothing deep at first. Just shared complaints about long shifts, the heat, and how the hotel's generator never started on time. They laughed over spoons of rice. You're different, he said suddenly. Jacinta looked up. Different how? He shrugged. I don't know, you just don't carry drama. You're calm, real. Jacinta blushed slightly but said nothing. She wanted to tell him that he was the first person who had made her feel safe in weeks, that his voice had stayed in her mind since the day he stood up for her. But she didn't. Not yet. Instead, they just kept eating. And in that quiet lunchroom, over soft laughter and simple food, something began to bloom between them. Something small, something hopeful. Days turned into weeks, and Jacinta found herself looking forward to every lunch break, not for the food, but for the quiet moments shared with Daniel. They always sat at the same corner in the staff canteen. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just sat in silence, eating rice or sipping cold malt drinks. But in those moments, Jacinta felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. She began to notice little things about him. The way he always said please and thank you, even to the cleaners. The way he smiled with only half his mouth when he was deep in thought. The way he never talked too much. But when he did, he spoke with depth. One afternoon as they ate together, Daniel opened up for the first time. I used to hate Sundays, he said, staring at his spoon. Jacinta looked up. Why? He hesitated. That's the day my dad passed. It's been 10 years now. I was 16. He was all I had. Her eyes softened. I'm so sorry. He nodded. It was just me and my mum before she passed too. I've kind of been on my own since then. Only child. Life taught me early to be responsible even when I didn't feel ready. Jacinta listened, her chest aching. He wasn't flashy. He didn't talk about money or power. But he had depth, heart, quiet strength. She was falling for him, and fast. Daniel didn't know much about her background. To him she was Anna,
the humble, hard-working girl who always helped everyone before helping herself. He liked her laugh, her calm nature, and how she listened to him like what he said actually mattered. There was something about her that made him feel safe, and that feeling only grew. One Friday evening after work, Daniel walked up to her at the locker area. His hands were in his pockets. His voice was a little nervous. "Hey, I found this small place not far from here. A quiet cafe. They serve terrible tea but amazing meat pie." Jacinta smiled, confused. "Okay?" He rubbed the back of his neck, half grinning. "Would you maybe like to go there with me tomorrow?" She paused, her heart skipping. It wasn't a grand gesture, no flowers, no pressure, but it was sincere. "I'd love to," she said softly. The next evening they sat across from each other at a small corner cafe tucked between two buildings. No chandeliers, no fancy menu, just simple food and soft music playing in the background. They talked about everything and nothing. Life, work, childhood, regrets, dreams. As the sun began to set slowly outside the window, Daniel grew quiet for a moment, then looked at her. "I know this might sound crazy," he began, "but I like you. More than I've liked anyone in a long time." Jacinta blinked, her heart racing. He wasn't just handsome, he was honest. She smiled. "It doesn't sound crazy, because I feel the same way." Relief spread across his face. And just like that, they began dating. It was quiet, simple. No labels shouted to the world, just moments, shared smiles, and something real growing between them. Daniel never imagined she was the daughter of the hotel's billionaire owner, and Jacinta didn't rush to tell him. Because for the first time in her life, she had found a love that saw her, not her name, not her past, not her wealth, just her. And that was all she had ever wanted. Jacinta smiled more these days. Not the forced, polite smile she wore with guests, but the quiet kind, the kind that slipped out when she least expected it. Like when Daniel walked past her in the hallway and winked, or when he left notes on her tray with silly jokes. They didn't do anything loud, no hugs in public, no holding hands during work, but people noticed. You could see it in how they spoke to each other, the ease, the laughter. And not everyone liked it. In the break room, whispers started. "Have you seen the way Anna follows the new accountant? She's always smiling when he's around. I bet she's using her body to get ahead." Sandra, now cold and distant, sat at the center of it all. Her voice was the sharpest. One afternoon she leaned close to a group of waitresses folding napkins. "You all don't know her like I do," she said, her tone bitter. "That's why I stopped being friends with her. She acts like she's better than everyone else, but trust me, she knows how to play the game." Someone asked quietly, "Game?" Sandra smirked. "Flirting with guests, charming men for attention. Don't be fooled by all that fake quietness. It's always the ones pretending to be innocent that are the worst." By the next day, the gossip had reached management. Jacinta was in the kitchen helping Mrs. Ajayi stir soup when Mr. Jude entered with a serious look on his face. "Anna," he said firmly, "come with me." She wiped her hands and followed him to the back office. The HR assistant was there, along with another supervisor. Mr. Jude spoke without emotion. "We've received complaints. Some staff claim you've been inappropriate with male guests, and with one of the senior staff as well." Jacinta's heart dropped. "Sir, I haven't done anything wrong. These are just warnings for now, but you need to be careful. Keep your behavior professional at all times." She opened her mouth to defend herself but closed it again. This was the same management that encouraged her to be friendly with guests, even those who acted inappropriately. Now she was being warned. How ironic. She didn't say anything else because she knew one thing for sure. Fighting gossip never worked, especially when people already believed what they wanted. So instead, she took a slow breath and said softly, "Understood, sir." She left the office with her head up, but her heart was hurting. After all the effort, all the nights sleeping on a thin mattress, all the dignity she had fought to keep, this was how people still saw her. Later that evening, while mopping the restaurant floor, Mama Peace passed by and touched her shoulder gently. "You're strong, my child. she whispered. Don't let their words confuse your spirit. Jacinta nodded silently. She knew what she was there for, and she wasn't about to let a few negative words discourage her. The next morning, at the start of the staff meeting, the branch manager stood before them with a printed notice in hand. There's an opening, he announced. Head office has approved a vacancy for a hotel supervisor at this branch. Applications are open to both internal and external staff. The deadline is in 5 days. A quiet murmur moved through the room. Jacinta stood frozen, her mind racing. This was her chance, not to prove anything to the gossiping mouths, but to herself. To show that everything she had suffered, every insult, every sacrifice was worth something real. Daniel's love. The more time Jacinta spent with Daniel, the more she felt her walls crumbling. Their late lunch breaks had turned into early morning coffee chats. They texted at night, sent each other little jokes during shifts, and walked together after work. It was simple. It was peaceful. And it felt real. But the deeper she fell for him, the heavier her secret became. She wasn't Anna. She was Jacinta Okafor, the billionaire's daughter, the owner of the hotel. And every time Daniel spoke about his struggles, his background, or his dreams of building something from the ground up, her chest tightened. What will he think when he finds out who I really am? Will he believe everything was a lie? Will he walk away? Meanwhile, Daniel wasn't as calm as he looked. He couldn't stop thinking about how different their lives were, even if he didn't know the full truth. To him, Anna was just a simple waitress. But even in that simplicity, she shone. He found himself staring when she wasn't looking. He admired how she moved with grace, how she always kept her calm even when guests were rude, and how she made people feel seen. What if she's too good for me? One afternoon in the break room, he caught 2 junior staff whispering as he walked by. Guy, why is the accountant always with that poor waitress girl? He can do better, nah. She isn't even up to his level. She's fine, yes, but come on, she's just a poor waitress who probably didn't even finish secondary school. Meanwhile, I heard the accountant graduated top of his class. He didn't say anything, but he wanted to tell them they were wrong, that he was the one who didn't deserve her, that being educated and rich isn't all, that she is an angel instead. He just shook his head and walked away. Later that same week, it got worse. As Daniel walked out of the accounts office, he saw Sandra leaning against the hallway wall, waiting for him. She smiled sweetly, but there was something cold behind her eyes. Sir, there is something I have been meaning to ask you. I heard you and Anna are getting close, she said casually. Daniel crossed his arms. So? Sandra gave a soft laugh. Just thought I'd tell you before it's too late. Tell me what? She stepped forward slightly. She's not who you think she is. Anna is just someone who knows how to act clean to get what she wants. That girl will use you to crawl out of her poverty, and once she does, she'll disappear. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Why would you say that? Sandra shrugged. I was her friend once. I know her. I even took her to my house because I pitied her. He didn't reply right away. But then he said clearly, No, you think you know her, but the only person I see trying to drag others down is you. Sandra blinked. Daniel leaned in a little. Maybe look into your own heart before you go around judging someone else's. Then he walked away. Later that evening, Jacinta sat at the staff lockers, folding her apron, when Mrs. Ajayi approached. I overheard something today, she said softly. It's that Sandra girl again. Jacinta looked up, calm but tired. She's the one who started the lies about you. Jacinta didn't respond right away. She just smiled faintly and said, It's okay. Mrs. Ajayi frowned. You're not going to confront her? Jacinta shook her head. There's no need. It'll all be over soon. Her voice was steady, but inside she was counting down the days. The days until she would stop pretending. The days until everything would come to light. The days until she would tell Daniel the truth. But for now, she stayed quiet and kind, because she believed that truth didn't always need to be shouted. Sometimes it just needed to arrive, in its own time. A week later, when the promotion for supervisor was announced, Jacinta hesitated. She had worked hard, stayed late, helped others, handled difficult guests, but still, A small voice in her heart whispered, "What if they only pick you because of who you are?" So she didn't apply as Jacinta Okafor. She submitted her form simply as Anna Johnson. No titles, no special background. Just her experience and character. And a few days later, the results came in. She had passed. That evening, Daniel surprised her by inviting her over after their shift. The apartment was beautiful and cozy, filled with the smell of freshly cooked jollof rice and grilled chicken. He had even bought a bottle of fruit juice and placed it on the table for the celebration. "I know it's not much," he said, slightly nervous, "but I wanted to cook for you. You earned this." Jacinta smiled so wide she felt like her heart could burst. They laughed, talked, and shared stories over dinner. For a few hours she forgot everything else. Her secret, her double life, her fear. All she saw was him. All she felt was love. But the truth has a way of rising. And it didn't take long. A few days later, Daniel was sitting at his desk when a colleague from the head office walked in with a knowing grin. "I knew it. That girl you're always hanging around with," he said casually, dropping a manila file on Daniel's table. "She looked familiar, so I ran a check. Thought you'd want to see this." Daniel opened the file. Inside were magazine articles, photos from business events, and a bio. Jacinta Okafor, daughter of Chief Okafor, owner of Palace Suites Group. His chest tightened. It didn't make sense. She was just Anna. Sweet, hard-working Anna. The woman who mopped floors, served food, and smiled through every storm. But now this? He stared at the papers, trying to piece it all together. Why didn't she tell me? Why did she let me believe she was someone else? Did she ever care at all? Why would a billionaire heiress with all that wealth come here and be a waitress? He didn't have any of the answers. That evening, he found her standing outside the restaurant after her shift, sipping water from a plastic bottle. "Jacinta." She turned quickly, surprised. No one ever used her real name here. Her smile faded as she saw the look in his eyes. "Daniel, you lied to me," he said, voice tight. "I told you everything about my life, my past, and you were just pretending the whole time." "I wasn't pretending," she whispered. "I just didn't want to be treated differently. I wanted to know what it felt like to be seen without the name, the money, the pressure." Daniel shook his head. "You should have told me. I didn't fall for Jacinta Okafor. I fell for Anna, the girl who worked late, who laughed at my dry jokes, who sat with me and made everything feel simple." Tears filled her eyes. "But I didn't fake who I am. Everything I felt every moment between us was real." He looked away, jaw tight. "I don't know what to do with this. I thought I finally found someone who could understand me. Someone who didn't come with a mask." "I was afraid," she whispered. "Afraid that the truth would change everything. And I guess it has." He looked down, jaw clenched. "Was any of it real at all? Did you truly love me?" Then before she could reply, he added, "You know what? I don't want to know," he muttered. "I just need time to think." And without another word, he turned and walked away. Jacinta stood there, frozen. Her chest rose and fell in small, shallow breaths. And when the door finally closed behind him, she broke down. She slid to the floor, covered her face with both hands, and cried. "Please don't leave," she whispered into the empty room. "Please don't let this be the end." But she knew. She might have just lost the one person who had ever truly seen her. And just like that, 2 weeks passed. Jacinta stood by the restaurant window, arms folded tightly across her chest, watching the rain trickle down the glass. It had been 2 weeks since Daniel walked away. Since then, everything had changed, and yet somehow, everything had stayed the same. He hadn't spoken to her, not a text, not a call, not even a glance when they passed each other in the hallway. And even though her heart still ached, Jacinta chose not to fall apart. Instead, she threw herself into her work, arriving early, leaving late, solving problems before they even reached the manager's desk. Everyone thought she was just excited about her new supervisor role, but deep down, she was doing everything she could to not feel empty. She didn't bother hiding anymore. She no longer tiptoed around her surname or used the name Anna. Although she didn't tell anyone anything, she made up her mind she wouldn't deny either. Because she wasn't ashamed of who she was, she just didn't want to be defined by it. One bright Monday morning, the entire staff was called to the hotel lobby for a general meeting. Most assumed it was for a routine announcement, but the atmosphere felt different, more formal. Jacinta stood near the back, not expecting anything. But when the branch manager cleared his throat and called her name, her heart skipped. "Today," he said, "we are proud to officially recognize the hard work, commitment, and leadership of someone many of you have come to know as Anna." The staff turned to look at her confused. She joined this hotel as a waitress. She worked late, helped everyone, smiled through challenges, and never once asked for favors. Jacinta slowly stepped forward, her eyes scanning the crowd. "Today, we proudly confirm her promotion to hotel supervisor, earned not through connections or status, but through grit, character, and consistency." Applause erupted across the lobby. Some clapped slowly, others with wide smiles, but one thing was certain, they all knew she deserved it. Even Mr. Jude nodded, clearly impressed. But just as the noise began to settle, another voice filled the room.
"Excuse me." All heads turned toward the entrance as Chief Okafor, dressed in a fine gray suit, stepped into the room. Jacinta froze. She wasn't expecting her father to show up. He walked up to the front, smiled, and took the microphone gently from the manager. "Good morning," he began, his deep voice echoing. "Some of you know me as the owner of Palace Suites, but today I speak not just as a business owner but as a father." He turned to Jacinta. "This young woman came into one of my hotels not as the boss's daughter but as a humble staff member. She wanted to learn, to grow, to earn everything without shortcuts. I wasn't sure she could do it, but she did. She made me proud." The room was dead silent. "Many of you know her as Anna, but allow me with pride to introduce her as my daughter Jacinta Okafor, the only child of the Okafor family and the sole heiress to the Palace Suites empire." Gasps filled the air. Mouths dropped. Hands paused mid-clap. Jacinta felt her heart pounding, her hands shaking, but her father smiled at her, eyes soft and proud. "You've made me prouder than you'll ever know," he said gently. Applause began again, but this time louder, stronger. The very people who once whispered behind her back were now stunned into silence. After the meeting, as people slowly returned to work, Sandra approached, her head low. "Jacinta, She paused, looking down. "I didn't know. I knew you were different, but I'm sorry for everything. I said and did horrible things. I was wrong." Jacinta looked her in the eye. She didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, she said calmly, "Sandra, you don't gain anything by bringing others down. It doesn't make you rise." Sandra nodded, eyes wet. "I understand." "I forgive you," Jacinta added, "but I hope you've learned something." "I have. Thank you." Sandra walked away quietly. Not long after, Mrs. Ajayi found her near the hallway, wrapping her in a big warm hug. "You carried yourself like a queen," she whispered, "even when they treated you like a nobody. And the whole time, you were a real queen." Jacinta smiled, her eyes full of tears. She didn't bother hiding anymore, because finally they knew who she was. But more importantly, they knew what she stood for. It had been a week since the announcement. A week since the staff found out who she really was. A week since her father introduced her to the world, not just as the heiress, but as a woman who earned her place. Now, Jacinta sat at her new desk at Palace Suites head office, dressed in soft neutrals, her hair neatly tied back. The office was spacious, polished, and everything she had once dreamed of. Her name was on the glass door, her title, Director of Operations. Everything was falling into place, but her heart still felt incomplete. She stared at her phone on the table, the screen dark. Her finger hovered above Daniel's name in her contacts. She hadn't heard from him since that night. He had said he needed time, and she had given it. But now, should she call him? Should she break the silence? Would he even want to talk to me? She whispered to herself. Just then, there was a knock on the glass door. Before she could answer, the door slowly opened, And there he was, Daniel, dressed in a crisp black shirt and trousers, holding a small wrapped bowl of flowers, his eyes warm and soft. Her breath caught in her throat. He stepped inside, shut the door gently behind him, and looked at her.
"I've had some time to think," he began, his voice steady, "and I completely understand you now." Jacinta didn't speak. She couldn't. Her heart was already pounding. "I was angry, not because you lied," he continued, "but because I thought what we had wasn't real. But the truth is, I fell in love with you before I even knew your name." He placed the bowl of flowers on her desk. "I let my pride talk louder than my heart, and that was my mistake." His voice lowered, sincere. "I don't care whether you're Anna or Jacinta. I just know that I need you in my life. I don't want to lose you." A tear rolled down Jacinta's cheek. She stood slowly, walked around the desk, and stopped right in front of him. "That's all I ever wanted," she whispered, her voice breaking. "For someone to love me for who I am, not what I come from. And that someone is you." They looked at each other for a moment longer, and then they embraced. A long, warm, honest hug, the kind that melts every misunderstanding, the kind that says, "I see you, I choose you." Still, there were no big speeches, no flashbulbs, no crowd. Just two people in a quiet office, holding each other like they'd finally come home. A few days later, Jacinta stood in front of a full-length mirror, smoothing down the soft green dress her mother had helped her pick out. Her heart beat faster than it had in months. Today was the day. Daniel was coming to meet her parents. She turned slightly, checking her earrings, trying to calm the voice in her head. What if Daddy doesn't like him? What if Daniel feels out of place? What if this ruins everything? But then she heard Daniel's voice in her memory. "I don't care whether you're Anna or Jacinta. I just need you in my life." She smiled and took a breath. When the doorbell rang, the staff opened the gate and welcomed Daniel into the Okafor family home, a mansion dressed in quiet elegance, not loud wealth. Daniel walked in, wearing a crisp navy blue shirt and simple black trousers. He carried a small basket of fruits and wine, not because he wanted to impress, but because he had been raised to show respect. Jacinta met him at the door, her smile calm but nervous. "You look nice," she whispered. He smiled back. "You look like home." Inside the sitting room, Chief Okafor sat in his usual armchair, sharp-eyed and thoughtful. Mrs. Okafor sat beside him, wearing a calm, welcoming smile. "Good evening, Sir Ma," Daniel said respectfully as he bowed slightly. Her father didn't smile, but he nodded once. "Have a seat." The next half hour passed slowly. The air was thick with tension, but Daniel spoke clearly about his background, his job, how he started his career from scratch, and his belief in hard work over shortcuts. Jacinta watched her father carefully. His expression was unreadable. Until finally he leaned back and said, "You're a very competent accountant. That's clear and straightforward. I like people who speak with purpose." Daniel smiled gently. "Thank you, sir." There was a pause. Then, to Jacinta's surprise, her father added, "But your greatest strength is how you make my daughter look at you." Jacinta blinked. He turned to her mother. "She never smiled this freely, even in our own home." Mrs. Okafor smiled knowingly. "Because with him, she doesn't feel like a headline. She just feels loved." Her father exhaled deeply, then looked at Daniel again. "Take care of her, that's all I ask." Daniel nodded, his voice soft. "I will. Always." Later, as they walked Daniel to the door, Jacinta felt a wave of relief and joy. She squeezed his hand gently. "That wasn't so bad, right?" He chuckled. "I think your dad nearly smiled." Jacinta laughed. "That's the closest we'll get to a full laugh. Trust me." And just like that, everything she had fought for, to be seen, to be loved, to choose her own path, felt beautifully, completely worth it. Not long after that day, the sky above Palace Suites shimmered with soft afternoon light. White roses and soft gold drapes lined the walls, while the scent of fresh petals floated through the air. It was the perfect day. The hotel was closed to the public for the first time in years, for something far more important than business. Jacinta Okafor was getting married. The staff moved with precision and pride, not as workers, but as honored guests. They had watched her journey, from the quiet girl carrying trays to the woman now leading a company with grace. And now they were here to celebrate the love that changed her life. Jacinta stood just beyond the grand doors, dressed in a breathtaking white gown, elegant, simple, and timeless. Her veil framed her soft curls, and her eyes sparkled more than the diamonds she wore. She took a breath and stepped forward. The music swelled, all eyes turned. And at the end of the aisle, Daniel stood waiting, dressed in a white and gold suit, hands clasped, eyes fixed only on her. As she walked slowly toward him, the moments of her past danced in her mind. Serving food while tired and unnoticed, crying alone in the hostel room. And now, this: love, peace, purpose. As Jacinta reached the altar, Daniel gently took her hand, and they turned to face each other. The officiant spoke words about trust, commitment, and growth, but it was the personal vows that touched every heart in the room. Jacinta held Daniel's hand tightly, her voice steady. "I found you when I was at my lowest, and you raised me higher than all my wealth ever did. You saw me before the name, before the story, before the title. You saw me, and that is love I never knew I needed." Daniel blinked back emotion, then smiled. "You showed me that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, serves, and keeps going. You taught me that love isn't about perfection, it's about presence. And I'm here, forever." The room was silent as they leaned in, and then a kiss. Soft, deep, full of promises made without words. In the front row, Chief and Mrs. Okafor watched with quiet pride. Her father's usual stern face had softened, his hand resting on his wife's. The applause rose. And the girl who once hid behind a fake name now stood in front of the world, not as someone pretending, but as everything she had become. A leader, a woman, a wife. As Jacinta and Daniel walked out hand in hand, petals falling around them, Jacinta whispered again, "This is only the beginning." And he smiled. "And it's already the best chapter of my life."